hope we are live here. Anyway, hello everyone. It's Dr. Jan. It's good to see you. I thought one of the things I would do before we quickly get started here is to introduce myself in case you don't know who I am. But I'm Dr. Jan, the owner and creator of Stop Bully Culture, and I help individuals and organizations identify and deal with workplace bullying. If you're being bullied, I help you shut down bullies. And if your organization is dealing with workplace bullying, I help you get rid of it. So those are just some of the things that I do. And so let's get started. And today we're going to talk about 3 mistakes that people often make. I see it all the time. I made a lot of these myself repeatedly. And ways that you can better, you can kind of quote unquote fix those mistakes and deal with workplace bullying and workplace bullies better. Because the reality is none of you were prepared or are prepared to deal with workplace bullies, because it's not something that we think about. It's not something that we ever think that we will run into until we are deep in it. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So one of the things that we do is we tend to respond in ways, reactionary ways, rather than taking a step back and responding strategically. And so the 3 most common mistakes that people make when they're dealing with workplace bullying and toxicity. Okay, this unfortunately really isn't just for bullying. It's also for toxicity. People respond this way to conflict, is they become defensive, right? And so they get defensive and they try to defend who they are or their position as a way to deal with the bully. They also, what happens is when bullies bully, they want you to engage, and you get caught up in the bullying and you want to make your point, you want to be heard, so you continue to engage, and you can continue to engage. That often makes you more vulnerable to bullying rather than shutting it down. And the other one is when you mirror toxic behavior. Because toxicity and bullying become the norm, you mirror the behavior that the bully, or your toxic colleague or your toxic boss or whoever it is, you mirror their behavior back to them. And that's not good either. So becoming defensive is one way, is a huge mistake. Continuing to engage and also then mirroring toxic behavior or bad behavior back. And these reactions are common. They're, when we're in the moment and those bullying things are happening to us, unfortunately, nobody is teaching us how to respond, and we're doing the best we can. So it isn't that these are necessarily wrong, but there are better ways to deal with the bully. And why these things are also problematic is because when you respond with defensiveness and you mimic their behavior, bullies, bad behavior, unprofessional behavior back to bullies, what happens is you're really feeding them and encouraging them rather than kind of shutting them down and taking away the sail or the wind out of their sail. And so then when you respond defensively, they twist, it escalates, and it can become very problematic. So let's go ahead and just break these down one by one. And the thing that I'm also going to do at the same time is we're going to talk about why these are common mistakes and why they're bad. And I'm also going to weave in for you some different things that you might do that would decrease your vulnerability and de-escalate and take the wind out of the bully's sails. And all of these things come from my microscripts on workplace bullying. So all of the microscripts or the techniques that we're going to use all come from my own material that you can get on stopbullyculture.com/shop. Okay, so again, getting defensive is the most common mistake, because we want to When a bully says, "Hey, Jan, you're not doing your job, or you're turning in your paperwork late, or you're not doing, you're not teaching students what they need to teach or need to be taught," then our defenses go up because, we know we're doing those things and we're being accused of something that's unfair. Let me just rewind. Bullying is unfair, okay? Responding strategically is not saying that what you're experiencing is your fault or you have to change or do anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have better ways that we can respond that actually do two things. They help protect us from additional bullying, and they also shut down bullies, and that's what we really want. We want to protect ourselves from bullying and shut them down. And that's what these techniques do. Where defensiveness does just the opposite. Because what that does is when you say, I am doing my job, I am doing that, then what that really says back to the bully or your toxic colleague, it's like you're giving them, a way to engage back with you, right? And so then they can say, well, you didn't do this, or they can make up anything. And then you become more defensive, right? And then they engage with toxicity at an increasing level. And defensiveness, again, is a common mistake. It's a common reaction, but what it also does is it alludes to self-doubt. It's like you're not really sure, did you really do it? Because you're defending yourself, okay? And then that's when bullies pounce on you because you sound like you're doubting yourself. You're portraying self-doubt, and that's what they feed on. So examples of things you might say that are not effective are things like this. I'm going to read those. I hope you don't mind. I'm not okay with being spoken to that way. If there's a concern, we can discuss it respectfully. I feel like you don't value my work. I do my job. I don't appreciate that kind of comment. Okay? So, yes, you can say those things back, but when you say, I don't like to be spoken to like that, what the bully sees and what they hear is, oh, I can go and pounce back, or I can say something toxic back about you because you've said something about me. Okay? But instead of, I am a firm believer that you never have to defend what you do in the workplace, right? Okay, sometimes you might have to show documentation that you've done your job correctly. That is different than becoming defensive, okay? And I worked with somebody who every time, she was very defensive about her work, and her bullies knew that that was a button they could push, and they would tell her what a horrible job she was doing. She would say, I'm doing a great job. I've done this and I've done that, and I don't like how you're saying things to me. And then it would escalate. And then everybody around the table, the faculty, would jump on her and piggyback on her, okay? Because she sounded like she was doubting herself. And so that's where bullies use those opportunities to pounce. So you never, ever need to become defensive, okay? What you can do instead is you be grounded, right? A good technique that you can learn how to do is to be grounded, right? Which really means just centering yourself, because again, a bully's the reason they're coming after you and telling you what a crappy person you are, or what a horrible job you're doing, or how everybody hates you, or what a problem you are in their organization, is they're trying to knock you off balance. Okay, so the first thing you can do is get some good grounding techniques. And you can't just get away with one. You really have to have more than one grounding technique, because sometimes Like a grounding technique is if you're going into a faculty meet, excuse me, a Freudian slip there. I was bullied a lot in faculty meetings. Into a meeting or an area where you know your bully is, maybe your boss is your bully, and you need to go in and have a conversation with them, and you know that that's a place where sometimes things can get difficult. You can do grounding techniques before you go into that meeting or that space where the likelihood of your being bullied will increase. Okay, so you have to have good grounding techniques. Okay, so you might do some deep breathing. Okay, you might, right, just breathe in or breathe out. That's a good grounding technique. Counting to 10, right? If the bully is, yelling at you, you can combine deep breathing with counting to 10. I used to, sometimes put my hands in my pockets or just squeeze my fingers together just a little bit, so I don't have nails, but my nails would just, I could feel my nails in my palms, and I would just focus on that area. Again, something to get my mind focused, but keeping my emotions in control. Because bullies and toxic colleagues want to pull the rug out from under you. The point is to get you ungrounded. So your first technique that you want to do in all of these that we're going to talk about is get some good grounding techniques. Okay, another thing I used to do is I used to make lists, L-I-S-T-S, lists in faculty meetings of things I wanted to do after I got out of work. Grocery lists, cleaning lists, if there was a holiday list, those sorts of things that would keep me separated from what was happening in the bullying, but keep me grounded in the moment. Okay? So some things, instead of being defensive and saying, I did my job, I'm doing a good job, why are you always coming at me at things like that? And why are you always interrupting me? Or those kinds of things. First get grounded and then say something like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let's stay focused on the task because we only have 20 minutes of this meeting left before we all need to go to our next appointment. Or say, okay, right? Neutral statements. I'm a huge fan of just responding to, okay, I hear ya. Interesting, right? Even my friend the other day said, I know that when you say, oh, interesting, you're just responding in the moment. That's a neutral way to respond to somebody who's accusing you of something. And the reason that neutral statements or just, nodding your head, those kinds of things shut the bully down, because if somebody says to you, okay, I hear what you're saying, or I'll take that into consideration, you're really kind of just shutting down the comeback that they could, right? I mean, does that make sense? And so it's those neutral statements do two things. They affirm to the person who's bullying you that you've heard them, okay? I'll take it into consideration. Oh, interesting. I hear what you're saying. You've acknowledged that you heard what they're saying. You're not agreeing to do anything. You're not defending your point of view. You're not defending that you're doing a great job. You're just confirming that you've heard what they've said. And so the response back to you becomes less and less likely. Because if they continue, let's say, for example, then they say, well, Jan, you're never on time. I can never find you in your office, and yada, yada, yada. Okay? Instead of becoming defensive, I can continue to say, okay, okay. Well, maybe after this meeting, we can talk about that. Okay? Because then again, you've acknowledged and you've said later we can talk about it. Okay? So those are just good ways to respond that are, fairly neutral. If you want to, I know sometimes people don't enjoy the neutral comment because they feel like the bully is getting away with something, okay, if you don't respond back with something. First off, let's just say this. You don't care about what the bully is doing. They're what you have to care about if you're in bully culture or a toxic work environment is you. Because they're always going to be getting away with something. That's who they are. You probably don't know a lot of it, but it doesn't matter what they're doing or what they're getting away with. What we care about in the workplace is protecting you and developing your skills so that you can strategically respond to bullies to shut them down. And there are times and places where you need to call things out. Okay, so if you don't want a neutral statement, you still, again, first step is always staying grounded. You might say something like, this just isn't the place for that. Again, let's talk about it after our meeting. Or another version might be this. This isn't the place for that. Let's set up a time to meet with our supervisor, George, and we can talk about that. Okay? And sometimes, again, another technique to throw in this is the broken record, where you just continue to say the same thing. Because sometimes techniques or sentences or scripts like, this isn't the place for that, can, again, that is a phrase, a phraseology that is more likely to invoke a response back from the bully. And you can say it over again. Again, I get it. Hey, Bob, this just isn't the place for that. Okay? And another technique is, again, depending on how long this goes, depending on who you have that's around, depending on if you have any collaborative partners, you might say, well, okay, we've talked about this, Bob, and I really appreciate your input. But Lisa, do you have something else that you wanted to add to the conversation? I see that you were next on the agenda. Okay, so you just politely move on to the next part of whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, so there's lots of ways of these things that we're talking about, and the micro scripts that I have and my power pack about verbal responses, where you can mix and match the responses to develop different strategies, and you can, dare I say, you can even escalate your own responses depending on the response that you get back from the bully. Okay, so the other mistake that we often make, and this is where I was, terrible. I was terrible at this. I could never let anything go. I would continue to engage. And the reason I think that we often, when we're being bullied or in toxic relationship, well, I'm having a lot of Freudian slips tonight. Toxic work relationships, I should have said that, is that we continue to engage because we are not being heard. We are not being taken seriously. We have reported, we have gone to our supervisor, we have tried to get the bullying and the toxicity to stop, and nothing has worked. And so out of those feelings of powerlessness and frustration, we want to keep engaging, because it's like, if we keep engaging, maybe somebody will hear and do something about the bullying that I'm experiencing. But the constant back and forth and the engaging with the bully actually increases your vulnerability to more bullying. And oftentimes, just like the example I gave of my previous colleague, who in meetings would become defensive, and then everybody else would piggyback up on her because she too would become defensive and then keep engaging. And then the bullying escalated, and then people piggybacked up on that, and she increased her vulnerability to bullying and received more bullying because toxic co-workers and other bullies began to bully her in those moments. Okay, so try not to go back and forth and engage if you don't have to. Okay, again, sometimes you have to engage back and forth with a bully about work. not about bullying, but about the work that you're doing. Okay, and that's the difference. Don't engage with them when it comes to the name calling, the gaslighting, that kind of thing. You want to engage with them if you have to and when you have to about work. So when email, I would used to get a lot of, very toxic and problematic and abusive emails, which the purpose of from the bully was to engage and hook me in this back and forth battle. That was the point, because then they had an opportunity to continue to bully me. Okay? And so when you stop engaging and you don't take the bait, so to speak, then they can't respond back. It's less likely they'll respond back. But if you respond like I did every email, whenever anything came across my email, I responded, then just like my coworker, they responded, and so did everybody else. And so then I increased my own vulnerability to more bullying. Okay, so things like this is probably something that you might not want to say. When you interrupt me in meetings and dismiss my input and you don't let me say what I need to say, that undermines me in meetings. Or excuse me, that undermines me, and it undermines me in this meeting, it undermines my work. Okay? And then a bully will say something else because again, they want you to keep responding. So bullies will often interrupt, cut you off, and try to make sure that you're not being heard. Okay? And how you respond to that is important. Okay? And so lots of times people will tell you to call that kind of stuff out. Don't, call out in meetings, don't interrupt me. But what that does for a bully is they can then say things like, well, that's not what I meant, right? They can gaslight. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. Was I interrupting you? Right? Did anybody see me interrupt Jan? I didn't interrupt Jan. It was my turn, wasn't it? Right? So then they gaslight. And then you begin to self-doubt yourself. Well, they did interrupt me, didn't they? And then, because then what you'll have people who will go along to get along in meetings like that who will say, yeah, you're right. You didn't interrupt Jan. Okay? And then again, which then undermines you, and your credibility is then shot to hell. Okay? So instead of calling out that behavior, again, you always want to document that kind of stuff. Okay? You want to document what's happening. Again, you want to stay grounded, because when somebody's interrupting you or they're sending you, nasty emails, it can be very easy for you to just want to respond because you just want that stuff to stop. You can, again, use neutral scripts. Okay, I hear ya. You can say things like noted, just one-word responses. If they keep interrupting you, okay, so you could just let them go off, okay? Or you can say things like, you might say if they're interrupting you in a meeting, you can ignore it. You can, say, Bob, really appreciate your comments, but I need to get my report out so that the entire team can have the information so that everyone else can do their job. Okay? That's when you're then making the problem bigger than yourself. So Bob's not just interrupting you, he's interrupting the team. And so you might even do a follow-up with that and say something like, isn't that right, Lisa? You really need the information that I'm providing so that you can do report A, B, and BY, right? Because then she knows she needs your information to do her work. And again, then you've roped somebody else in without really having to say to Bob, you're an ass for calling me out like that and interrupting, okay? The other technique you could try is this. is if it's not that important for you to, you know, give your report, okay, you might say this, Bob, you know, you really have a lot to say, and I'm going to go ahead and let you have the rest of my time, and I'm going to provide 5 bullet points with the main topics and information that, again, the team needs to do their work, but you go ahead and you can take this time, and I'll send my information out in an email, and I hope everybody is okay with that. Okay, so what that does is let Bob talk all he wants. Nobody gives a crap what he has to say. It makes you look professional. And also, people have your information then via email. Okay, and you can then use that documentation, that email, for saying, hey, look, I'm doing my job. It's not my fault Bob can't keep his mouth shut in the meeting, but I've provided the information. And the other thing it does is if people want to hear what you had to say, they're more likely to tell Bob to shut up, okay? But you have an escape because you can do it via an email, if of course that's allowed in your job, okay? And so again, not engaging with the bullying, engaging with the work is so important. But that's where those grounding techniques, again, are really, really, really important, because it grates on your nerves when that kind of stuff happens over and over and over. And the other reality is sometimes, like today, I don't actually feel all that superior. I'm kind of sick, right? So I'm probably off my game a little bit. Sometimes those same things happen to us at work. Life doesn't stop because you have a job. And we don't stop thinking about what's happening in our personal life when we go through our professional life door. And so sometimes we are off a little bit. And so sometimes when Bob pushes, we want to snap. But the grounding techniques help us make sure that we don't do that. So our baseline is always one of professionalism and credibility and good behavior, right? And good professionalism. That's who we are. Okay? And so the third mistake that we often make is mirroring toxic behavior. Okay? We mirror back the behavior that we're experiencing. So this is something everybody's done, right? I've done it. They've said something to you. You've snapped back with something, fairly derogatory, or you match their tone. Okay. You throw a sarcastic dig. You say something, kind of crabby or mean. And in those moments, does it feel good? Hell, yes, it feels great, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's a huge mistake. And one of the things I want to point out is a couple of weeks ago, I was just, of course, scrolling on social media. And there is actually people who are requesting to get microaggressions to throw at the colleagues that they don't like. Okay? I'm going to say it again. There was a podcast on microaggressions to throw at toxic colleagues you don't like. Okay? First off, I was enraged. Okay? I didn't use any grounding techniques there, but I was swearing at the social media, the social media video I was watching, because I thought, are you kidding me? Okay? And why it's so problematic is, especially if you are the one being bullied or victimized, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. You can't say, I want a healthy and toxic work environment, but by God, I'm going to use these microaggressions to go after that bully. Because you know what? Then you're doing the same thing that bully is doing to you. Okay, and I get it. Did I engage in microaggressions and mere bullying and toxic behavior? You damn straight I did. But that's one of the things that I regret, because you can't want a healthy work environment and then try to get toxic or microaggressions because you don't like somebody at work. And the other thing I'm going to say about that is, what are you, 2 years old? I mean, come on. Like, I did those things when I was a kid. And even now, maybe I would think about, gee, it would feel good to do something like that to so-and-so. But you don't do that because you're an adult and you want a healthy work environment. You have to be a healthy colleague, whether your colleagues are or not. Okay? You can't engage in microaggressions. First off, you know what it feels like when those microaggressions are on steroids. Okay? So don't engage in bullying or unprofessional or microaggressions. Find a healthy way to deal with that rage that comes up when you're the one being victimized. I was just telling students on Tuesday that one of the things I did when I was being bullied is, you probably don't know this about me, I love gaming, and I played World of Warcraft for a long, long time, and they had player versus player arenas where you would go on the Alliance or the Horde side, and you'd fight with the other side. Okay, player versus player, PvP. And that's one of the things I did on a regular basis when I felt powerless and upset and rageful about being bullied, is I'd go in and think about those colleagues who were so hateful. And I would pretend that when I was PvPing in WoW Battlegrounds, that those were my colleagues. And did it feel good? Yeah, it did. But I tried my best not to engage in toxic behavior at work, okay? Because I wanted the department and the culture to change. It wasn't going to change if I would engage in microaggressions. Grounding techniques are your first step here, and this is where you have to have more than one grounding technique, because deep breathing and counting to 10 might not work. Clenching your fingers might not work. You might have to take a break. Whatever it is, you do whatever it is to keep yourself maintained. Okay? So, and again, I'm not saying that it's easy to do those things. I'm just saying that you can't engage in bad behavior if you're then going and reporting bad behavior and telling people you want that kind of behavior to stop. So you really have to know your red flags. Because one of the things bullies are really good at is poking and poking and poking. And the minute they see you flinch, they know that's a way that they can get you. Okay? And you have to know yourself. Like, first off, I am somebody who can go from 0 to 100 in less than a half a second. Okay? And so when I do that, I really have to be able to say, you better get out of here now because you're at 100 and the smoke is coming out of your ears. And if you don't get out of this situation, it's not going to be pretty for the people who are around you, or it's not going to be pretty for yourself. So you have ways to get out of situations at a moment's notice. I often refer to these as escape mechanisms, right? You can throw the pod hatch open and get out. Okay, one of the things that I do or have done in the past, I'm diabetic. So will I be using that as an excuse until I die? Yes, right? But if you know me, I'm never anywhere without fruit snacks, glucose tabs within an arm reach away. If I have a backpack, I have glucose tabs. If I have my purse, I have glucose tabs. If I have pockets, I have glucose tabs. But not everybody knows me that well, and so I would say things like this. My blood sugar is getting low. Looks like I forgot to bring my glucose tablets. just going to step out to my office. My blood sugar is really getting low. I'm going to go grab those, sit for a minute, and I'll be right back. Okay? And I take time to, calm myself down. What do I want to say? Do I want to say anything? And what is my goal if I engage? Okay? So you can say things again like, I just need a minute. I'm just going to step out for a second. Okay? I'm just going to step away from this. Okay? Or you can say, we've been in this meeting for an hour and 25 minutes, and I think we've covered about everything we can cover for this meeting. What do we want to put on the agenda for the next meeting? Okay? Or you can say things like, again, neutral scripts. When you go from 0 to 100 and you don't want to engage in toxic behavior, having a ton of neutral scripts like, okay, I hear you. Interesting. I'll take that under advisement. Right? Those kinds of things give you a minute to catch your breath and then figure out, do I want to respond? Do I need to engage? And if I do, what is my goal? Okay? So, and you can also, again, if you're in charge, you can say, you don't have to let somebody go on and on and on. Okay? If they've made their point, you can tell them, thank you, Bob. We really appreciate your input. Let's keep moving. We need to get to 2 more things on the agenda before our time is up. Okay? If you have bullying in your work environment and you are running the meeting, you can cut people off, okay? And you should, so that they're not taking up time. Or you can set ground rules, and if Bob, your bully, is breaking the rules, you make him adhere to the rules, which means be quiet. Okay? You don't have to say it like that. Again, you can say, hey, Bob, you know what? We have a 2-minute time limit when everybody gets a chance to speak. You've gone over for 2:15. Thanks, Bob. Who's next? Okay? And yes, Bob's going to push back on that. But when you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, Bob's going to get the message, because then you can also have peer pressure that will tell Bob, keep your mouth shut. Your 2 minutes are up. But if you allow Bob 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and then you allow Bob 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and then you allow Bob 3 minutes, see where I'm going with that? The power that you once had to keep Bob in line is gone if you don't hold Bob accountable immediately. And so there's just so many things that you can do to strategize and keep yourself grounded and respond to bullying in ways that shut down bullying rather than escalate it. And again, like I said at the beginning, they protect you, and the flip side is too, they're not only protecting you from increased bullying, they're also shutting down that bully in ways that you might not have thought about. Okay? And so the 3 mistakes people make, again, just to wrap it up for the evening, is people get defensive. They stay engaging. They engage and they engage and they engage, and they mirror back the behavior that is being done to them. And really, bullies are counting on you making those mistakes because those mistakes and those errors in how you're dealing with them give them the green light to spin the things that you're saying. They can react to what you're saying, and they can continue to gaslight and scramble and keep you guessing. Okay? But of course, now there are better ways to respond. Okay? And so I created just a small guide called Shut Down Bullies. It's a set of just micro scripts, just like I see. Interesting. Those kinds of micro scripts that you can get today and use tomorrow. And I also have a power pack on verbal responses. I also have one on written and email responses if you're interested in that. But the nice thing about the Shut Down Bullies and the power pack on verbal responses is that they use easy, real microscripts that you don't have to spend very much time looking at to think about. They're short, they're strategic lines that you can use on the spot. You can, you know, build your own set of microscripts based on the microscripts that I have that work effectively for you. And it doesn't require a bunch of drama. It doesn't require really anything. It just doesn't require much change on your part. It just requires you to think about these microscripts and use them strategically in your workplace to be able to deal with bullies more effectively. And most importantly, these microscripts and how you respond to bullies is about protecting you. It isn't really about them. My concern with workplace bullying is protecting you. And these microscripts will really going to help you. So I'm going to drop the link to both of those down below. If you want, you can just go to stopbullyculture.com/shop and you can see all the resources I have. Anyway, I hope you are doing wonderful and well. Thank you for being here with me tonight. And I will see you next week.